everyone, and welcome back to Purple Noon, a podcast. Long time no see. We're done. We're so close to the end of school and everything, and we're finally being able to get on track as if we promised. But
Yeah.
today is a very, very special episode because not only do I have the amazing and gorgeous and beautiful Savanna Lanausse, but we also have our sensei, David Blakeslee from the Criterion Reflections podcast. How are you, David?
Woo!
Oh, I'm really happy to be talking with both of you again today. It feels like it was about this time back in 2020. It was like the spring of that year, just as the pandemic realities were settling in, that we first got together online and kind of struck up a conversation. And I'm really happy to be back on your show again. So I'm looking forward to our chat about Pasolini and all that.
And we are so happy to have you back. It's been a struggle, and sadly, it's always been one of those things where, um, like we were like, oh yeah, it's fine, it's fine. And then as it came closer and closer, like Savannah started a new job recently,
Hmm.
and then I am towards, and she's also in school too. So it's like us towards the end of our finals week and stuff like that. And finally, it seemed like tonight was a good night. Finally, I felt like we've been pushing it off for what, 6 months?
Yeah.
It's it's yeah, the making of the story of this episode is quite an epic saga in itself,
Yes.
because yeah, I think it was back when, because you're not doing TikTok anymore, are you, Savannah?
No, I am not. I don't
That's
know if
right.
you've caught up with that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Neither one of us are doing TikTok
Yeah,
anymore.
No,
So
yeah.
Stephanie told me a little bit, but back when you were, we had a little exchange. I think somebody had
Yeah.
made a comment about Pasolini, and then I sort of jumped in and said, "Well, Pasolini isn't just solo. He isn't just like this monster, that everybody sort of gravitates towards the spectacle and the outrage and the
Yeah.
controversy of his final film and his tragic death. There's a lot more to him than that. I mean, he is an intense personality and a provocative filmmaker, but don't just jump to the end of the story to understand what's going on there. He wasn't just out there wallowing in filth and misery for its own sake. He had a message, and I always say Solo should be the last Pasolini film you watch, not the first one or the only one.
Mm.
So
yeah, and
that's
sadly,
kind of what,
it's
yeah.
been kind of the most infamous out of
Oh,
like, and I've never heard anyone else mention any other Pasolini film online, anything or anything
Oh,
like that,
yeah. Me neither.
mhm,
unless like they're talking about Solo. Like that is the one that's only mentioned with him.
Well,
mhm.
especially in the Criterion community too.
Oh yeah, the fandom anyways. I mean, there is a significant group of people who do respect and understand Pasolini as an artist. And that's kind of where I was wanting to sort of steer the conversation. And so I think it just kind of somehow got into some of his earlier films, and I thought Mama Roma would be a good one to talk about if we ever wanted to do a podcast together,
And it's
because
perfect timing now too
yeah,
because of this Pasolini bundle that's coming out soon. I think
yes.
within
Oh
what,
yeah.
the next 3 months or so?
It's
Yeah.
is it in June, something like that? I think it's in June. Yeah, this is the 101st anniversary. Or like last year was his 100th birthday, and everybody's saying, "Oh, Criterion's going to do a Pasolini box set for his 100th, like they did with Fellini and Kurosawa years ago, and Ingmar Bergman." And then that year came and went, and it's like, "Oh man, what a letdown!" They kind of they did my guy wrong, but then they
Yeah.
did Pasolini 101, which is the name of that box. So it's this 101st anniversary of his birth. And
Oh.
and that's the idea. And it's Pasolini 101 because it's all of his earlier films, like from 1961 Acatone up until the end of the 1960s. And then the rest of the films, the trilogy of life, which is what, the Decameron and A Canterbury Tale and Arabian Nights, and then Salo. Those were the last four films he did in the 70s, and they've already got nice Criterion editions. So I like the fact that they didn't have to put everything in one big box set, because if you're like me and you're going to get it, well, then you're going to get duplicates of films that are already very
Yeah.
nicely done.
Hmm.
So it is a very exciting. This is by far the biggest Criterion release of the year so far, and might be the biggest one altogether, just because it's got so much stuff in it, including the one that we're going to talk about tonight.
Yeah, so I did look it up. It is available June 27th of this year.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that should be, and I'm happy that they're doing this because I feel like, and it's one of those things where Pasolini has been like his last film was Solo. He's been gone for so long. I I don't know. Like for me, the only thing that I knew before watching Mama Roma, and I did see Mama Roma like about 2 years ago for the first time because I had
Hmm.
gotten the Criterion disc and things like that. But I've always wondered if out of all of his films, did he ever intend for Solo to be the one that he's remembered most by? Probably not
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of his career and everything like that.
Yeah.
And also, like, it wasn't his final film by choice.
Right.
Sadly, he had been murdered. That was
Hmm.
like, so
Mhm.
do you know a lot about the Pasolini history and things like that, David?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I know quite a bit about his, I mean, I'm not an expert, I won't say that. I mean, I don't speak Italian, I haven't read his original literature, but, during the 1950s, he was a very respected poet and writer and essayist. So he was like a literary figure, I think he was born like, well, he was born in like what, 1922, right? So he kind of came of age. Think about what was happening in Italian history. So in the early 40s, as he's turning 20, Italy is like right in the middle of World War II, and of course they're on the losing end, and life is tough. If you go to even his Wikipedia page, kind of talks about some of his early formative experiences. He had a brother who was killed in like 1945, a younger brother, got involved in some of the skirmishes and warfare that was going on, and basically it was him and his mother while his father had been arrested, taken prisoner of war. Uh, this is kind of the turbulent environment that Pasolini grew out of, and saw a lot of deprivation, a lot of hardship.
Yeah.
And then we've talked about in like Rocco and his brothers and stuff. Italy went through a pretty spectacular kind of resurgence in the late 1950s. They called it like the economic miracle, because what a country that had been really hard pressed all of a sudden started discovering prosperity and getting the factories in production again. And so like La Dolce Vita and Fellini, that was kind of the big money and the flush of excitement. But Pasolini's message, a lot of it was about, there's still a lot of poor people. There's still a lot of parts of Italy and Rome and the cities that haven't
Yeah.
been rebuilt. And that's kind of where his movies focused at this period of time in the early 1960s and even through later part of the decade. But this is kind of in that neo-realist phase, kind of like Bicycle Thieves, or it's like let's look at the poor people and the things that they have to put up with, and the injustice and the hardship.
Hmm.
And he's also engaging with ideas. He's talking about faith and religion, politics, and Italian culture, and sexism, and just all the different pressures and tensions in that society, and trying to capture that first by writing books and novels and poems and articles for magazines. And he was like a public intellectual. He would give speeches, or at least put ideas out there and try to engage and address the social issues of his times. And then as his kind of fame and skills developed, he said, let's try my hand at cinema, at which like with Fellini, with Rossellini, with all these Antonioni, all these big Italian filmmakers kind of coming to the forefront. All of a sudden, film was like a way of being artistic, not just telling stories for entertainment. I mean, they had their comedies and romances and all of that, but you could sort of tell this bigger story and engage with people on a different level, showing life as it was. And that was kind of Pasolini's kind of entry into cinema. It was like, let's really kind of take off the blinders and look at the difficulties and challenges of life, without glossing it over or dressing it up. Let's talk about
Yeah.
what's really going on.
Yeah, and
Mm.
with I think with Pasolini and everything like that, I was also really surprised to find out that he also had a very, very close relationship to Bernardo Bertolucci,
Hmm.
who
Yep,
is at the subject of a podcast that David and I recently had
that's
did
right.
when we
Yeah.
talked about Last
Yes.
Tango in Paris. But like to the point where they were very close. Like I think there was a point too where they lived with each
Hmm.
other, and I
Oh
ended up
yeah.
finding out that Bertolucci was his assistant on Acatone.
Hmm.
So, which I think is so cool how it all connects and stuff. And you can kind of see, I mean, they both were poets. They both shared communistic views.
Hmm.
And so it's kind of seeing how they had influences on each other, looking back at both their careers is
Yeah.
pretty fascinating through and through. Now, Savannah, how versed are you with Pasolini?
Unfortunately, not very much. The only other film I've heard about before Mama Roma, and obviously Salo. Salo was the only one I heard at the time. The only one I think and I could be very wrong. Did he have something to do with? Oh my god, it was in another Italian movie, and it was about actually like a prostitute as well.
Knights of Cabiria.
Yes, I
Yes.
don't know if
Mhm.
he did that, but I heard
He
he was
was.
a yeah. Sorry.
Oh no,
Okay.
he was part of the crew. He worked with Fellini. He was like an assistant
Oh,
director. So this is basically part of his own tutorship. So you see how it's all connected, right? So Rossellini, the father of neorealism, he did Rome Open City, a film that was made in Italy just as the war was like winding down. But he was shooting in the streets of Rome, again talking about the hardships of life during like the occupation and the warfare. And Anna Magnani, who is like the central character in Mama Roma, she was in that film. And there's a very famous scene where she's running to go after her husband as he's being hauled off, probably to be executed. And while she's running after the truck, where he and his mates are in, she
mhm.
gets shot and dies. And it's a very poignant, heartbreaking moment in that film. And
Wow.
it kind of helped make her a star. So Rossellini brought Fellini along as his kind of mentor, was his mentor, and Fellini wrote scripts and did things, and then Fellini, of course, becomes a director on his own, and he brings in Pasolini, and Pasolini comes in, and he brings in Bertolucci. So you see this whole,
It's like a
it's like
big circle. Yeah.
yeah, it's like the Renaissance masters. You know how I don't know, Leonardo would teach Michelangelo, and Michelangelo would teach Donatello or whatever. So it's kind of like this big artistic community, but they all had their own unique style and approach. Fellini was into comedy and surrealism, and Pasolini was more grounded and realistic, especially in this early phase of his career.
Mm.
And so I feel like this is a film that really is very moving, and to me it's a story that I find, again, really engaging, with all the stops and starts for when we could actually schedule this conversation. I've had to watch the film a few times because I always like to have it fresh in my memory, but I've never get tired of watching it because it's a very well done film. At least that's my perspective. Maybe you got different opinions, but this is a really well told story that I feel like kind of touches the heart both of the specific time and place where it was made, but I think it's got characters and situations a lot of folks can relate to, even if this feels like a culture from a long time ago or something very different than the life that we're accustomed to ourselves.
Yeah,
Yeah, when watching
definitely.
this movie, I immediately like, especially the intro to this film,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
like
Yeah.
it just emphasizes, you know, Anna Magnani's character through and through. How she is at a wedding, and for me, at least the first time I saw it, I was a little bit shocked because I thought, I think his name is, yeah, Franco City, or
Hmm.
Citi, his character, I thought that was her son at
Me
first
too. Me
because
too.
of
And I
the
was like,
age
oh
difference
my
between them.
gosh.
And also
Yeah.
because she was going on this tangent, and this is before Ettore is,
Yeah.
introduced and stuff like that. But I genuinely, I was like, oh, like it just, I feel like maybe Savannah and I, like, because we're both Italian and things like that, maybe at least for me, I had immediately picture in my head who this woman reminded me of in terms of my own family and everything.
Right.
The classic, like, I thought it was good. Like, first watching it, I was like, oh, this is the mother-in-law trying to steal the show. And
Literally.
it's
Yeah. I
so
was like,
funny
oh
how I
gosh.
could have not been more wrong from that perspective onward. But it really does highlight her character so well. And as we soon realize the relationship between her and the man who's getting married, it starts making a lot more sense over time as to why she kind of stole the center of attention, why she acted the way she did. And Anna Magnani is one of my favorite actresses of all time. I fell
Hmm.
like head over heels for her and her acting ability when I first saw The Fugitive Kind.
Yep.
Because I just love, like, for me, I was shocked that she, starring alongside Marlon Brando, was so easily able to take over the scene and compared to
Hmm.
like one of the biggest actors of all time. So
Yeah,
I
to her,
love Emma
Marlon Brando was
Yanni.
just that kid who kind of came up. She had already been doing her thing in Italian film
Right.
from the mid 1940s, so she was not phased. I mean, I know Stephanie, you and I talked a lot about the Marlon Brando mystique and his presence in Last Tango and all of that, but she she respected him, but she certainly wasn't intimidated or blown away
Oh
by
no, she
it's
actually
Brando, right?
liked him.
Hmm.
From Brando's perspective, he said that she like had a thing for him, and he said that he wouldn't sleep with her, and she was like kind of throwing stuff all over the place and things like
All
that
right,
when it happened.
Brando.
So I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
that's Brando in his prime. You never know. Yeah, like so it was. And I always think with Anna Mignani, she is probably my favorite figure of like the whole Italian neorealism scene
Hmm.
because she defines so many different levels of it. Like she is like the perfect picturesque, like whether it be for like something like the Rose Tattoo
Hmm.
or even Mama Roma or Fugitive Kindness. So she knows how to play a role. She knows how to steal a scene, and with the whole Italian and neorealism, she became almost like this icon, and specifically like an icon for like feminism and anti fascists and things like that. So
Hmm.
I truly love, and I'm so happy that we got to finally talk about her because it's been a while since we talked about her on the show. So I was so happy to just watch this performance again because from the beginning she steals the scene.
Oh,
So
she pours her heart
Oh
into it, right?
yeah.
and
Absolutely.
you could
I
tell that this is something that this is was near and dear to her heart.
I mean, this was actually my first I've seen clips of her, but this was my first time actually like watching a full performance of hers.
Hmm.
And I will tell you, I was so surprised that, and then I realized why, but this should have been the biggest actress at the time, and she should still be like well renowned now. And it literally, and when I was doing my research, it literally just came down to the fact that she wasn't conventionally attractive. And that is absolutely crazy to me because when I saw her performance, I'm like, oh my God, this is top five best actresses I've ever watched in my life. There's no
Hmm.
way.
Yeah.
Hmm.
There is absolutely no way. I
And she
was
was also
floored.
older. So kind
Yes.
of it during the time it limited her role to just being like the mother. She always played some type of, especially during the late 50s, 60s and stuff like that. She just kind of assumed the role of a mother role every time because of her age.
Yeah.
And that also probably even with that hindering, the realm of characters and stuff that she was able to play, she still delivered it every time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, with Mama Roma, and so, David, do you know the
Hmm.
story of why Pasolini made Mama Roma? Because I was a little confused after reading the plot, because I've never seen Assiatore, I think is how it's pronounced. Um, and they feel very similar. Have you seen Assiatore and everything like that?
It's Akatone.
Akatone,
Akatone.
my bad.
Yeah, it's his first film. Yeah, I have seen that. Yeah. And again, this just kind of came out of the literary stuff that Pasolini was doing. I mean, he wrote both of those stories. Akatone is the name of the lead character, and he also wrote another novel called Un Vita Violenta, or A Violent Life. And I actually recently got a review copy of that like a couple months ago. I think I just did like a TikTok clip about it. So Pasolini didn't produce that film, but it was actually made right around the same time. So this was kind of Pasolini's his shtick, his specialty at the time. He was the chronicler of life in the hard pressed urban poor on the outskirts. I mean, in those days, the suburbs, we think of the suburbs as kind of like the cozy, comfortable place where the nice houses are. Well, in those days, the suburbs were like the pits. That was like where life was really tough. And in A Violent Life in particular, there's a lot of footage that's in these. It's basically almost like documentary of these kind of, you know, not homeless camps, but really like lean tos and just slapped together buildings with lots of crime and violence prostitution, of course, just people hustling and scrambling to try to making a living however they can. And that's basically, that was the dark side of the Italian society. And we were talking about factories and money and glamour and Sophia Loren and the beautiful people. That was a part of Italian life, but it wasn't the whole picture. And so Pasolini was really trying to say, let's kind of get our head out of the clouds and let's think about what life is like for these poor people. And so I think he was just depicting these different characters and different kind of slices of life and sort of the tragic elements of what people had to get through just to survive. And of course, in this movie, not everybody does survive because life is hard and unforgiving. And that's basically what the story is. He wanted to talk about women who had been forced into prostitution, and of course in that culture, and you both know Italian culture more than I do as far as living in it, and the way the options that are available to women, especially back in that time.
Yeah.
You could be the good Italian mama staying at home and raising the kids, but if your husband died or if you had to somehow fend for yourself and make money, there wasn't a whole lot of possibilities. And so prostitution in that society was, kind of a shameful but a practical thing that certain women could do or did just to get by. And that's kind of what you see happening here is at that kind of raucous wedding at the beginning. She's basically getting her last digs in on her pimp, the guy who'd been kind of, you know, passing her around and making money literally at her physical expense. And now he's getting married, so he's kind of getting out of that racket. But she has a son. There's some intimations that might actually be, you know Carmen's son, the
Yeah.
Franco Zitti character.
Yeah.
It's
There's
never really
the,
made
"Oh, I'll
explicit.
tell him
Yeah.
the truth," but
Hmm.
Right.
not sure how far the truth extends.
Right. So Carmen thinks he's going to go straight. Maybe he found a woman who would marry him despite his reputation. You could almost tell, like, everybody at that wedding kind of knew what was going on, But it's like,
I
Yeah.
listen. Why was she invited to that wedding? That
I,
that was the first thing that came to my mind. I'm like, why? Why did he
well,
invite her to this wedding?
when she comes in with 3 pigs on a leash,
Yeah.
she may not have actually been on the guest list.
Why did they let her in? I thought that was very funny.
I always thought it was also funny because she was like, "Oh, you're gonna go and live your hick life. You're gonna go on the
Yep.
farm and everything like that." She's the one who brought 3 pigs to a wedding, though.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Yeah. So basically, but she's now been able to set a little bit of money aside, and there's this jump in time because you sort of see her picking up Ettore, then it goes to a little slow motion, and then he's a little kid, but now it's like she's been somewhere, he's been staying with some relatives. It's never really explained, but
Yeah.
she's gonna get her son and get him out of this little small town backwater. We're gonna go to Rome because I can make money. I can sell vegetables from a street cart. Like that's her ticket to the good life. She can have her own apartment. She doesn't have to sell her body anymore. She's gonna maybe try to get her son into a better environment, although maybe she's got delusions of her own as far as what the quality of life is going to be like when she finally gets there. And Ettore, I mean, think about from his perspective. His mom's been kind of a ghost for the last 10
Yeah.
years,
yeah,
and now all of a sudden, oh, you're my mom now. We're going to go live in your apartment. You're going to raise me like your son. It just doesn't really add up. And of course, he's at that teenage time of life when kids are naturally just wanting to go do it themselves and find their own way. And she wants to kind of make up for lost time and make him her little boy again. So it's not really a good combination, but that's the situation that they're in, and they got to figure it out what they're going to do about it.
I have to say one of
Yeah.
my favorite aspects of this film is, and I'm gonna call it the victory lap that she does. I love the moment where we keep revisiting her
Hmm.
kind of doing her rounds at night where she normally goes, and the first time we see her, it's very much like I said, a victory lap, because she's
Hmm.
like, "I'm done with this. This is the last time you'll see me again. Au revoir," type of stuff. Like, and
Hmm.
she's high on life, and she's like talking about things of her past. And I love the way it's filmed, very Fellini-esque. It reminds me a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
like the
Oh yeah.
bathhouse scene from 8 and a Half, where it's like her just walking around and things like that, and just people coming. The idea of her just having one conversation, people coming in and out as they please, but she's still on that one track mind of like going through her life and how she's won, like she's finally won, she's out, she gets what she deserves after putting her work in. And I love how we get to visit that again later on when the circumstances have changed and everything like that. But it's just so well filmed. Like genuinely, like I love how dimly lit the scene is with all the different lights and how,
Hmm.
and it's also really like it's also just impressive on her part to be able to remember that much amount of dialogue, fast
Yeah.
talking too, like fast talking, supernatural, without any interruptions. Because that scene, I believe, from watching it, was just only one take,
It's
like
one
just
cut.
from
Yeah, there's no cuts.
there's
It's
no cuts.
one solid sequence. It's an amazing. It's a tour de force, as they say. Of, and she does it twice. Yeah, and all the other actors too. They all have to hit their cues and come in. So just from a performance and technical perspective, it's very impressive. But you're right. It's like kind of like her whole life is kind of being revisited here, from both a celebratory and then more of a lamenting aspect the second time around. So yeah, those are really outstanding sequences. And again, this is a guy's second movie, and he's putting this kind of stuff together. It's like very, very well done.
Yeah, and
One
I
of
really
oh,
like these little seeds of commentary that you can tell like are very reflective of his own view. And you can kind of see like how early on into his career how those seeds of like his views on Italian politics during that time and stuff were sprinkled in and then ultimately culminating to his biggest or at least what I believe to be his biggest political commentary, which is Salo.
Hmm.
So I mean, for a second film, this is so strong. It is strong. It
yeah.
covers many different levels. We have many different like, and the thing is like even though the young man playing Ettore, who's also named Ettore,
Hmm.
um, even though he does a good job, there is such immense weight on Anna Magnani and her delivering performance in this film. And it's so good. Like she is so good to the point where she is enough for the film. You don't
Oh
need to even
yeah.
add in like and Franco City, I feel like his performance was great too. By the way, didn't realize until midway that he was in The Godfather. I was like, he
Hmm.
looks
Yeah.
familiar. He looks familiar, but I
Oh,
couldn't
that's
figure out
cool.
why. It's just the fact that this whole movie was orchestrated and kind of put on the shoulders of Anna Magnani and delivered immensely is just insane. And it shows an a dirty side of neo-realism that at the time many people didn't want to see or was taboo or controversial to show. Savannah, do you have any like standout thoughts about Mama Roma that you're just itching to talk about?
Oh my God, of course. I was very this is the first film that I think I've saw that really nailed genuine war trauma, post-war trauma, and generational trauma.
Hmm.
I I think the most profound thing for me was how she kind of relayed a lot of that on her son. There are parts where she's just like, "Oh, I'll give you money, like here, like let me take care of you. I'm gonna be fine." And there are parts where she like berates her son, and there are parts where she's trying to get him a job, and then she's doing a lot of things that, and she's learning how to be a mother for the first time too, in all reality. But she is still very broken. There's genuine pain behind this person, and Pasolini and Anna Magnani definitely understand that there's something so real about it. um I mean at one point we see her make some pretty bad decisions with her son, especially involving like a girl and stuff. But I couldn't help but think like this is very real, and it's not something I've seen in a lot of movies. And it had to be done by a person that really understood the culture at this time and what the Italian
And
people
live
were
through
going
it.
through. Yeah. Another thing that really floored me about Anna's performance was there's a scene where she's walking in the middle of the night, and a bunch of people are passing by, mostly men, and she's like telling, pretty much telling the story about what happened to her.
The
And it,
victory lap. Yeah, that's the victory lap.
yeah,
Hmm.
she's talking about the death of her husband and how she had to do and stuff. And it's a really sad and tragic story, but she says it with such it reminded me a lot. So my grandmother is from Italy, and she grew up in the war and everything, and I can't tell you how many conversations I've had in a similar manner where she's just telling me things in that specific way. That specific, like not crying, not, oh, like this is my life, but almost like, yeah, this is what happened to me. And it is so genuine. I've never seen it in another film, even Italian films talking about the subject. So Pasolini had this deep understanding about what the Italian people were going through,
Hmm.
and so did Anna. And you could really see that there's something about when actors, and I don't see it very much these days, and that's why I'm really harping about it, understand the pain of their people, and these are two people that really got it. So I was very, very moved by that, and very impressed for sure. I
Yeah, I
guess
think
I'm a
that's
Pasolini fan now, I don't know.
well, I mean, he has some extremes. It's an acquired taste, and not maybe every film he makes is going to be one that you're going to want to say, "Hey, let's go back and check that one out again." This one here, I think, is extremely rewatchable because you're right that the pathos and the character studies and just the agonizing situations that they're put through. I don't know. There's just something kind of gripping and compelling about that, and it's also I think Pasolini wanted to create a sense of compassion for these people because like in any prosperous society it's so easy to judge the down and outers. Oh, she went into prostitution, what kind of corrupt character is she? Well, you don't really know the whole story. You don't really know what circumstances led her to think there's just no other choice. I've got to get some food on the table. What else can I do? It doesn't necessarily absolve all the moral aspects of it, but it's like this is a dark situation that she was facing. She had a child. There were some desperate decisions that had to be made, and how quickly life's circumstances can put us in those types of situations just when we think everything is settled and comfortable and predictable, right? And I think that's really one of the things that he's trying to do too, and also this young, the story of Vittori, and this kind of, you could say, oh, this kid's just no good. I mean, he goes into hospitals and he looks for people that he can rip off, and
Yeah.
he gets mixed up with this girl, kind of his first crush, but now she's a prostitute and she wants him to give her money, and so he's stealing his records from his mom's records and selling them to the pawn shop guy. I mean, he's just like just a troubled kid. Well, he's had a very turbulent, chaotic life. Now you can't even say an upbringing. He's just basically had to scramble for survival, and then look what happens to him. He's literally strapped to a table because he's so unruly, and then he gets sick, and the story takes its turn. And then and again, Mama Roma, she's trying to do is raise her kid. She knows she's messed up. She knows she's made some questionable decisions, but she wants to somehow redeem all of that and get life back on track, like anybody else. She's a woman who wants to love her child and give him the best life that she can, and through circumstances out of her control, that hope is taken away. So yeah, it's a very kind of heart-wrenching saga that you're on in this hour and 45 minutes, and that's also told with great artistic integrity. The
And great care. And
Yeah,
great
yeah.
care.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, he's not wallowing, or he's not rubbing your nose in the
Yeah.
sleaziness of it all. He's saying this is a tragic story, you know, um, of very humble and anonymous people that society hardly gives two hoots about, but their pain and their struggle and their tragedy is as important and as significant as maybe the lives of the rich and the famous, who are often celebrated or made the objects of our envy and our admiration because they're so gorgeous, or they're so, suave, charismatic, whatever attributes you like. And I like those kind of movies too, but this is just kind of taking a look at another side of life, and stories that were happening all around them if we just open our eyes and pay attention.
And the little seeds being planted with Ettore when he is like just talking and passive, and he actually says like, "Oh yeah, I used to be like sick all the time when I was a little kid and stuff like that,"
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
not knowing that that would lead, like, I don't think from the beginning you expect him to pass, and in such a way that he
Yeah.
did too, and to succumb to like just kind of the fate of his um his poor behavior, sadly.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not expecting it, and even like a second time watching this film, it did also, I was like, oh yeah, they did this, wow. Like I just, I couldn't believe it even a second time around that they went this far. And it really is a, it's a tough pill to swallow, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure it was the a realistic truth. And I ended up finding out that Pasolini apparently based this character off of the fact that in like 1959, a young
Mm-hmm.
man did die in prison on a detention table from a
Yeah,
fever.
exactly.
And it
This
had
is
like a
based
huge
on real
impact,
events, right? Mm-hmm.
and it had like a huge impact politically. And so, you know, hearing how he can take a story like that he had heard like in real time, and then kind of make it into such a unique piece on, and such a unique reflection for what was happening. Like that's really what this movie feels like, a big reflection of the times, what was going on, and what it was like trying to come out of that war era, and how the struggles were perceived even when there was hope, even when there was effort and things like that to create a better life, and how
Yeah.
it all just kind of trickles down from just living through the wartime and everything. So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Savannah, were you kind of shocked with the ending?
Oh yeah, so I don't think I was expecting a happily ever after per se, but I definitely wasn't expecting it in that manner. Um, I don't know what exactly I thought. I knew that the film, like Anna's goal was to essentially try to save her son from like herself. And we
Yeah.
see that throughout the whole movie. The minute he gets involved with the girl who turns out to be a prostitute, she just like, no, this can't happen, this can't happen, and pretty much like goes not off on the girl, but like it's very ironic in the way it happens. And then she gets
Well,
him a job.
she hooks her up with another more
Literally,
cynical girl,
yeah,
right?
it's like I don't know how helpful that is, but I mean,
Right.
she gets him a job as a waiter. She tells him who to stay away
Mm-hmm.
from. At the same time, though, she is kind of enabling the behavior. She gives him money, and it's just this whole thing of like she is doing her absolute best, but she doesn't know how to because she's also in this mess. She's also still semi in this life. So I
Mm-hmm.
knew it was kind of just this big circle, but I definitely wasn't expecting him to die. That was a shocker for me. But now that you were talking about the fact that he was saying he was sick all the time, like I can definitely kind of see it now.
Yeah, and there's also with Anna Mignani's character as Mama Roma, there's this big sense of false confidence. Like she's like so confident in certain things, and
Yeah,
certain actions and what she does. Meanwhile, she's just trying to figure out life on her own. And
Right.
even there is with Franco Citti's character Carmine, um when he's saying like, you think you know everything, when I found you you had lice, and is just like ripping her apart, ripping her a new one, and kind of just also saying like, hey, like you've never had it all. Like from the beginning, you've never had any ounce to yourself. You didn't come from grace or anything like that and fall. You were always just at your lowest. And it wasn't until me and stuff like that. And when Carmine gets very, very, I guess you could say, not in,
yeah,
like big headed. He gets big headed about
yeah,
the matter. So with Carmine and I think also with Anna Mignani's character, she probably is so enraged because she's literally, I don't even think it's not just saving him, Ettore, from her, but it's also from saving Ettore from becoming his potential dad, may or may
sure,
Right.
not,
Mm-hmm.
unconfirmed.
sure,
Mm-hmm.
Especially with the fact that, you know, here he was talking to an older woman, giving her money and things, and
yeah,
kind of
yeah, yeah.
laying down the groundwork for her original relationship between her and Carmine. And I'm sure that's why she was like, "No, don't go with this prostitute. Go with this one because I know this one and they already have a pimp and stuff like that, you know?"
Right. Right.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah, and just that big personality, the Mama Roma who just barges into a wedding and steals the show, and she's laughing and she's just throwing her shoulders back and just letting it rip like that. It's this very brash, brassy woman, this type of Italian femininity that in some ways is a cover for all of the insecurity
Oh,
and
yeah.
all the self-doubt and the self-loathing and the shame and the guilt. Because I mean, as you know, she's probably been called every name, and she's internalized a lot of that. And maybe there's reasons why she has her regrets, but it's one thing to have your inner kind of struggles, but it's also another thing to have it all poured and dumped on you from the outside by people who think, well, because you're one of those types of women, you deserve the mockery, the name calling, the slut shaming, all of that stuff. That's just your lot in life. And like, how do you get out from under that? Well, your best hope is to see if you can sort of break the generational curse and get at least your child on a better track. And when she starts seeing all those same things happening again,
Yeah.
yeah, that's where it's like, yeah, where is the hope? How do we get out of this? And I think where Pasolini is coming at is like, look, our society is not as hard pressed and downtrodden as it was maybe 10, 15 years ago. There is money, there's wealth. Maybe there's ways that we can try to take care of these people who just were not on the inside track. Um, those are the questions he's presenting to his society. But like, I think as one of you said, this film stirred up a lot of friction. There were people who felt like he's showing things that ought not to be in a respectable film, or he's drawing our
Yeah.
attention towards uh people who really don't deserve the time of day, and people with more of a hardcore, traditional point of view. Pasolini found himself already in trouble with censorship and people in the government, people in the church trying to shut him down. So it's one of those things where it just kind of got that whole thing started. And that's where I think his filmmaking became more aggressive. He just kept pushing back,
Right.
and that's the story that you see as you follow him throughout his career. And there's a lot of those films I have not seen yet, but I've seen some of the films in between this one and Solo, and you can sort of see the arc that he's on. And as he gets into the 70s, he starts looking backwards, and that's why we get into the Decameron, the Canterbury Tales, stories that were based in the medieval era, as he's recreating those kind of ancient scenes, but also having commentary about today's world and what was happening in Europe in contemporary times, but telling it through the lens of stories from many centuries ago and how some of those patterns reestablish themselves, just like we saw the patterns in Mama Roma's younger life establishing itself, even as she thinks, well, I'm going to change of scenery, I'm going to go to Rome, I'm going to
Yeah.
get a job and be respectable. But there are some problems that are deeper than just a change of address is going to cure.
Oh my gosh. It's interesting too. She had a very, I guess, I don't want to say a fantasy, but like this idea of like what respectable means.
Hmm.
I remember I think it was the scene in the church where she was like, "Oh, well, like my son's got to do this," and the other person was like, "No, like you should send him to school and get him a trade." And it just in her mind, it was like, no, it has to be this way. Like, respectable people do this. He's kind of old for that. And there's this pattern of her being like, oh, we're going to move and we're not going to associate with these people. And it's funny because it's just like, okay, but like, you are those people. And it's just kind of the same, like, I'm trying to dig us out of this generational curse almost. But I don't think she also realizes that, like, her son has like some trauma of his own from his
Hmm.
own upbringing, and she seems almost like she's trying to make up for it in some way, but like her trauma is just outweighing her son's trauma, and it's just this whole circle. So I thought it was interesting that, like, in her mind, like, we have to pose as respectable people, but we're kind of just going to ignore the situation we are in right now.
Yeah, it's kind of a surface level fix. I mean, I really appreciate, Savannah, your perspective on kind of the trauma that's not really being recognized and addressed. I mean, I think that is a benefit, if you will, of the era that we live in now. I think there is a lot more talk about that. There
Yeah.
is a recognition that if you've been through domestic violence, sexual violence, I'm sure I'm sure Mama Roma had been raped or at least abused in different ways. But there really wasn't even the language to talk about it back then, or it was just like shameful secrets that you shouldn't discuss in the light of day, or you just go talk to your priest about it. It's like, well, and nothing wrong with talking to the priest, but that may not be the entire picture of what's needed, you know. And so those are issues that I feel like this film can really just prompt some awareness and get us thinking, and where do we see this happening around us and people that we know, or where can we even relate from some of our own personal experience to what these characters are going through in the story. And those are big questions. I think that's why films like this, they're artistically well done, but I think they've got a deeper impact than just, oh, that was a pretty well made movie, you know.
Yeah.
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 One thing I also think that was really smart with Pasolini to do was because during this time, it's 1962, there were definitely a plethora of female actresses that could have been picked for the
Mm-hmm.
role. And
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
one big one that, of course, stands to mind is Sophia Loren, because Sophia Loren
Mm-hmm.
played roles similar to this, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily as deep and dirty, as at least from what I've seen of Sophia Loren. But Sophia Loren is like, in terms of like Italian cinema and like playing prostitutes, she's also another big one because she was always very proud of that. She
Yeah,
was
she
like, they're
loves
human. She
it.
was like, they're human. They deserve to have their stories told too.
Mm-hmm.
And she,
Mm-hmm.
I believe she actually said she was also like raised by like prostitutes, like women in her life who were prostitutes and things like that. But I think picking Anna Magnani may have not been the obvious choice from a marketing standpoint because she is older. And by older, I was surprised because in the movie they make a joke of how she's in her 40s. She's actually in her 50s during the filming
Hmm.
of this. She's 53, which clearly, like I said before, was not a common thing to employ a 50-year
No.
old woman. You had women in their 30s playing grandmothers during
Yeah.
this time. So
Yeah.
I really think probably Pasolini saw maybe even reflections of his own mother in her, especially with the age and during the time, because out of everyone who's worked on this film, Anna Magnani saw all of it, and she saw
Oh,
all of it
yeah.
through and through because she was born in 1908. So I think picking her, like, they couldn't have done it better. I don't like, and like I said, there's a few other people who I could have imagined, but it wouldn't have had the impact. It wouldn't have sold, and it probably wouldn't have made as much of a realistic connection between someone like Anna Magnani and her co-star Ettore. Um
Yeah,
so
I
and
think Magnani actually pursued Pasolini because Akatone did make kind of a splash. It wasn't like a huge hit, but it was like it sort of put him on the map. And again, like I said, Pasolini was already like a known figure, but he was making the transition from literature into film. And it's like, oh, wow, this guy's got something going on. So I think she actually sort of kind of campaigned for the roles. Like she really wanted to collaborate with him. And again, looking at the realities of the film industry, she's a very accomplished actress, but she's in her 50s now. I mean, over the hill or whatever people want to say. She knew she wasn't, but I think she recognized that she could work with him. I think he saw in her kind of that gravity, that kind of tragic element where Sophia Loren is a fantastic performer, but she's more on the lighter side,
yeah.
at least that's what I've seen as
She
more of
she
the
doesn't look
comic
like, you
side of
can
it,
put
right?
like, with Sophia Loren, you could put her in the role and she could do the acting well, but
Oh yeah.
overall, if she was younger and things like that, especially during this time, it would have taken a lot to roughen her up. Like,
Hmm.
in terms of like when we think about like maternal roles and things like that, especially from this era, they're rugged women. They are rugged women. They have been through stuff, and you can tell not only by the way that they carry themselves, because it's this very loud and confident, like, I've been through it all and I know what I'm doing type of persona, but
Yeah, again,
also
it's kind
the
of like an armor, like don't mess with me. I'm
yes,
pretty
but the
tough.
physicality of it, and
Hmm.
even like
Hmm.
Anna Magnani, I believe she was a beautiful woman, but she was at the time of this film rugged. She was older,
Hmm.
things
Yeah,
like that,
yeah, yeah.
smoker, all that look and everything like that. I also wonder, and this is very, very speculative. So apparently, Anna Magnani was had a romance for a while with Roberto Rossellini.
Oh, I
Um,
heard about it. Yep, I
so
watched.
I wonder. Apparently, she was also, and like I mentioned with the Brando and
Was
stuff like
that
that, how
before or after Ingrid Bergman? I just got to know.
before.
Oh,
And,
okay.
well, a little bit during too.
Oh
Yes.
boy.
So,
Okay. Wow.
So
yeah.
one thing, because of the fact that I've heard about her and being spiteful towards Brando and very explosive about the notion, apparently they broke up. Roberta Rossellini and her broke up around the time. So I wonder if she maybe said, you know what, screw you, Rossellini. I'm gonna go do work with Pasolini now, because they
Hmm.
didn't work with each other for a while. Like they had fallen in love in like the 40s, and they had split by the time by Rossellini and Bergman were starting to get together. But also, like Savannah said, he dabbled in both. Um, but I wonder, because she has just that fieriness, passion to her, and you can see that transform in a lot of other roles that she takes on. She always has that fiery passion. She has that look to her, like you do something wrong, cool, she'll kill you. And she even has that type of persona here in the
Yeah.
film, where she was like, "Oh yeah, that girl over there looking at my son, I can get her out of here like this in a
Yeah.
bag if I need to." Like it's. So I think
Yeah.
I really wonder if maybe that was also a part of it, and where that kind of fiery passiveness comes from. Because it also does say here that they had become very violent, volatile, and passive, and were
Mm.
always blowing up on each other during films. So I wonder
Mm.
how that translated into like this other section of her career, where she kind of steps away from Rossellini and starts dabbling in other. Because um, she also did another. She was in a, like, before she passed, she was in a Fellini film as well. She was in, but she also played herself in it. I believe it was Roma. I believe it was Fellini's Roma.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. Yeah. No, I did a podcast on that like a year and a half ago, something like that. Yeah. She it was kind of a cameo scene, kind of a late in the film. She kind of pops up in a strategic moment, but very much, just her face in that film in that time was a signal to act to the audience, like, oh, there she is, like in the film Roma. So she had already kind of established that reputation. I mean, and that's the other thing, Mama Roma, and her kind of epitomizing the spirit of the city of Rome, and all that Rome sort of
Yeah, and
stands
just kind
for,
of being a big
symbolizes. Hmm.
representation for the women going through all of this. And I think that was a genius idea on Pasolini's part, to not give her this very specifically tailored name for her, but to kind of just have her known as Mama Roma, and representing not only like characters like her, but other prostitutes and other women struggling through that time.
Yeah, and even those shots, of like what was the transforming city of Rome. You see the dome of, it's not St. Peter's, but it's a kind of a cathedral or church sticking up above those apartments. You probably saw those shots several times throughout the film. That's kind
Especially
of
in
the
the end.
yeah, oh, exactly. At the end, where she's ready to throw herself out the window now that her son is gone, and she's rescued by the people who've been chasing her. And what keeps her from jumping, besides the people around her, is that sight of the dome. And I wrote a review of this film back in, what year was that? I'm looking it up on my, back in 2012, so 11 years ago. And it's to me, it was like sort of a breast sort of sticking up above the skyline, like Mama Roma, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of like, the sacred in the middle of all of this economic expansion, these new apartments, and you sort of, the picture is like all this open field, basically just dirt and hills, and then also these, you know 10-story apartments in huge blocks, and then at the center of it all is the church, is the faith, is the ancient kind of, the religious heart of the city, and all that Rome and its glory and its past sort of symbolizes. It's like bringing all of that heritage and all that history into the present moment and saying, what have we done, and are we
Yeah.
honoring the tradition that we've inherited from all these previous generations. So it kind of expands the story on a very high level. But I think it's kind of, again, the artistic and poetry that Pasolini was so known for in the written word. He's putting that on film now.
Well, anyone else? I feel like we've went through the movie through and through.
Yeah,
Anyone
I
else
think
have
so.
anything that they want to chime in on, bring to light, maybe a detail that may have went unnoticed?
Well, I think going back to, because you touched upon Sophia Loren a little bit, and I was
Hmm.
pondering it because I really love Sophia Loren. And I think when you compare Anna Magnani two actresses like Sophia Loren and Monica Vitti, I think there's something that really stands out to me is that Monica Vitti, uh, Sophia Loren, and even like Claudia Cardinale, Gina LaBrigida, I think the difference was those women were kind of put through at the time. Um, I believe it was called like the Star Machine. There was like a specific word for it, but they were kind of being filtered through, I think it was the Hollywood machine, and
Mhm.
sort of given roles, maybe more Sophia Loren, that couldn't have been as deep for the time. Um, I guess more in the American sphere too, and Italy
Mhm.
for sure. When you look at films like Sophia Loren did that were really fun, and I love those movies, but unfortunately, I think those women were not given like roles like this. But because I Sophia Loren was in a movie called Two Women, which also dealt with the war, but there is a pretty rough scene in that movie, but it doesn't go as deep, emotionally deep, it doesn't go as politically deep as this movie. And I'm really happy Anna Magnani was allowed to go there, because she is definitely she has a lot more emotional depth than those women did. But I think it was just a combination of that. I don't think those women were given those opportunities, and Anna Magnani is the better emotional. I don't know if that makes sense, but I
Mhm.
think it was just a combination of those two things. But Anna Magnani definitely is one of those people that can just hold a movie on their own, like Stephanie said, and there's not a lot of actresses like that
And I
now
think
or then.
with what you're talking about, Savannah, there was definitely like it was almost like when making those films, like Two Women and other films similar to that, it was almost like there was a veil, like a little bit of a blur
Yes,
where they could go so
exactly.
far, but not only so far. Because at the end of the day, these were women who were making money at the time. They still have like the beautiful woman who has a rugged character and stuff like that was a almost a money making point, but they could never be so rugged to the point where they became ugly, right? Or they could never become so rugged to the point where they became almost
Like
impure
offensive
in a
to the
way.
audience, offensive to the
Yeah.
audience they're trying to reach. Exactly. Yes.
Like you
Right, like
could
letting that anger out, that harsh emotion, that kind of, the feistiness, not just in a
yeah.
cute way, but like she's like seriously pissed. I mean, and she
Yeah.
is almost like dangerous, risky, challenging. She's not going to be intimidated by authority figures. She's a force to be reckoned with. Yeah.
Yeah. And these other types of similar films and things like that, it was that veil. They had that Hollywood veil on it where at the end of the day, Sophia Loren, even if she was playing a rough character, she still had to be Sophia Loren at the end of the day. I don't
Mhm.
think that
Yes.
they would ever allow her to fully transform into a character as far as she would have gone. And I think also it's difficult, right? Because especially from a writing and directing standpoint, and you're working with the great Sophia Loren, it could be difficult to imagine her going that far in these roles. Whereas someone like Anna Magnani, who's older, rugged, probably people know around that time, like, oh yeah, she reminds me of my aunt, she reminds me of my grandma, all these different people. So it was a lot easier to kind of divulge her into the role as opposed to someone like Gina Lollobrigida or Sophia Loren and things like that. So, but I do think
Yeah.
it was called the Star Machine.
Mhm.
So
I thought I'd made that up. I'm glad you confirmed that.
no, where it was just like that
I'm making
process
things
of
up.
like taking like a foreign film star and just making them as Hollywood centric as possible. Like for
Yeah.
example, one thing in Mama Roma, one young woman, she raises up her arms, she's got like mega armpit hair, which wouldn't have
Yeah,
been
yeah.
shown back in the day. And if you had put that Hollywood veil on it, probably would have made her shave for like a 2-second scene of her
Mhm.
raising her arm over her head.
Mhm.
So even just things like that, even though it's so small, like yeah, we see a woman having armpit hair, it just adds like even these little more nuances of just realism
Well,
all
and there's
across.
times where and there's times where she's on screen and there's no makeup, or if there is makeup, it's very lightly applied. I mean,
Yeah.
the dark rings under her eyes, and just kind of her hair was kind of wild in some places.
Yeah.
Just letting that kind of unvarnished face and body and presentation,
And she wasn't a
you know.
bad-looking woman, but it's
No,
different
no.
from, like,
No, no.
even, like, with, Rocco and his brothers, like, they bring in,
Hmm.
what Claudia Cardinale in the beginning,
I
and
mean,
that
she is an absolute goddess. I mean,
yeah,
good
yeah, and
grief,
they're like, "Oh, yeah,
right, right, yeah.
she's with, with us here in the slums of
Hmm.
Rome,
Yeah.
just chilling," as if that was, like,
But she's
realistic for the
still
time.
glowingly radiant,
Of
and
Exactly.
course.
yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
when Sophia Loren hit the big screen, the audience, the movie studio, everybody knew when you walked into that theater, you had to see Sophia Loren. No matter what role
Right.
she was in, there was never a point. Claudia Cardinale, all of them. You were gonna go see the beautiful actress, and even if she's playing, a little bit like, oh yeah, she's not
They
looking
put
great. The
dirt on
next
her
scene,
face, but she still has, like,
she's
big eyelashes and
exactly.
lipstick and
Mhm.
everything.
Anna Magnani was allowed to be a chameleon and actually
Yeah.
like really secrete her pain in this film.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I think, I mean, she's incredibly talented, and all those other actors are talented too. I just, um, there wasn't a chance, and I'm glad Anna Magnani was given that chance to do that because she definitely had the talent for it.
Alright,
I'll
any last tidbits or
I'll
anything
just
with the
mention
movie?
one more thing.
Yeah.
Tonino Delicoli, he was the cinematographer, and I think this is another thing. Pasolini had a great eye for collaborating with talented people. So just a few highlights from this name, which may or may not be that familiar. But once he kind of got his career started, this was still fairly early. I mean, he started in the late 40s, but mostly just small scale Italian films up into here. But then he did the cinematography for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly,
Oh, very
Once
cool.
Upon a Time in the West, Once Upon a Time in America, Lena Wertmuller, Seven Beauties. Life is Beautiful was his last film, the
Oh
Roberto Benigni,
wow.
and
Yeah.
then he died shortly after that, and won awards. But again, there's a very quality eye and hand at work just in the camera work, and once you sort of get past the story and just understand and appreciate the details of how the film was made, again, just a really impressive piece of work from the script, the filmmaking, the editing, obviously the performances. We had a lot to say about that. Just yeah, it's a very very accomplished film for a guy who's in a career change, starting something new, and this is movie number two, and it's like he's banging it right out the gate.
Yes.
And swinging, and it's
Awesome.
so interesting how even just, like, I've only seen Mama Roma in terms of, like, his entire
Hmm.
filmography, my bad,
There you go.
filmography, but it's so interesting to see and, like, read the plot of this, and then as you go down, it's just I feel like I'm on a Lars von Trier fast track to
Hmm. Yeah.
Salo, because it goes from Mama Roma, which is already a little like it already a little difficult and things like that with the themes and stuff. But then you go into, I think it was Oedipus Rex was shortly
Hmm.
thereafter.
The
Then
Greek mythology. Yeah.
yep, and then
Oh wow.
Teorema, and it just kept getting a little like it felt like Pasolini was just furthermore pushing the button, just seeing how far he could go
Yep.
until he would get to his last film. Which I appreciate, like I genuinely like that. Like the fact that he was always kind of pushing himself, because you kind of see directors get in their comfort zone, right? They
Yeah.
know what they like to do, they kind of do it with it. I call it the Martin Scorsese effect, where at some point it's like, for example, like Martin Scorsese does a comedy and stuff. Okay, maybe, but it's always going to be, a gangster film. It's always going to be that's his best of the best. And I
Hmm.
really like how Pasolini just kind of inches his way into a little bit of a darker, like, oh, okay, this was a little bit hard to talk about. Let's kind of slap you in the face with something a little bit
Yeah.
more, and it just keeps going and going. And I appreciate that. And I like that because it's just further shows more how he wanted to just bring something different to the table. Like,
Yeah.
no one was making Oedipus Rex. Everyone was making like biblical pictures. No one wanted to
Hmm.
touch Oedipus Rex.
Hmm.
No one wanted to touch, like something like Teorema and things like that. And it just kept getting more and more, many different layers of just like playing around with like just the things that at the time movies didn't want to highlight. So I really appreciate that with him and his work, and I'm really excited to take a deep, like, I do want to get that box set for sure.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
I have Teorema, and I am excited to finally go see it. soon because I've been
Yeah.
holding on it and I was like, ah, but now after watching this, I'm like, okay, it's got to go on the top of my list now.
Well, Pasolini was an artist with a capital A, and he thought of himself as an artist for the ages. He thought he studied the great, Renaissance masters and people of that sort. Not that he was just like, blowing his own horn, but he was not just out to be a successful showbiz figure. He didn't make movies to see how much money they would, generate at the box office. Obviously, he wanted to, recoup his investments and get funding for the next one, but he really was an artist first and foremost, not just an entertainer. And so he was always, like you say, pushing it, looking for unique angles, adapting material that seemed like, how could you ever make a movie out of these ancient manuscripts and things of that sort? But that was his ambition. He really wanted to do something unique and distinctive that would stand the test of time, and I think he's done that. Again, it's not casual viewing. It's just like, let's pop, put up some popcorn and drop a disc in the player. You sort of got to, focus up and be ready to be
Yeah.
maybe challenged, sometimes offended, or at least uh, asked to take a good long look at what's going on there. And he does have some pretty crazy humor and provocative scenes in there too. So it's not like they're just boring academic exercises, but his films are pretty unforgettable once you get into his wavelength there.
And I'm sure he was more comfortable getting into the nitty gritty topics as he became more
Oh yeah.
comfortable with his sexuality and
Hmm.
who he was
Hmm.
at the time, when obviously that was like the biggest of the biggest taboo for any guy out there.
Hmm.
So it's such a unique career. And then also too, like just seeing how like he directed 28 films but only had written like well, directed 28, written 65, and just seeing like his influence. Like I didn't know that he was a writer for Knights of Cabiria. I didn't know
Hmm.
that he was a writer for even La Dolce Vita. He's
Yeah.
uncredited, but like just seeing how he had
he
this
he did
long
like the
term.
dialogues. He had a great ear and a great eye for faces. I mean, you'll see a lot of really memorable faces in his movies, but he also got into all the different dialects of Italian. I'm way beyond anything I'm familiar with, but I understand he really knew the language. He could tell like what neighborhood in Rome you were from based on how you would speak or present yourself, and different parts of the Italian culture as well. It wasn't just all about Rome, but the different cities, and Italy has just such a fascinating subcultures at the different parts along the boot there. So he was into all of that stuff and a master of it, and it's just so productive and prolific. It's like, how did he have time to do all that stuff?
Yeah.
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 He definitely, in terms of not necessarily in work, but in terms of career and how they kind of aged with their work, definitely reminds me of Rainier Werner Fassbinder, in
Yep. Yep.
terms of like I feel like they both had similar paths that they took in terms of creating films and then just trying something different, and then just and Rainier Werner Fassbinder has like one of like my favorite like director backstories, because
Hmm.
he was just so dramatic in real life.
Oh yeah.
Like
Oh yeah. Yeah.
learning about all of his lovers and things like that, how he would be with the man and be like, I hate men, I'm going with a woman, and then would marry a woman and then be like, I hate woman. And then like it was like
Hmm.
that kind of just layer after layer after layer after, like almost like the most interesting book that you've ever read, where every chapter is just insane and different. I feel like they both had a lot of similarities in their careers. And was Rainier Werner Fassbinder murdered?
No, he just basically lived life to the excess. I think it was a drug
Oh,
overdose.
that's what it
Yeah.
was. Yeah, because I knew he had died pretty young, like in all
Oh yeah.
consideration stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, like I really am interested now in kind of cracking this Pasolini egg that I have now, and just kind of going through all the careers and stuff. And you guys know me, I like a controversy. I like controversy. I like dark. I like things that make me uncomfortable. That's just who I am. So I'm really happy that we kind of revisited this. And finally got to do this podcast, because it's definitely awakening a hunger in me to kind of dip more. I'm gonna wait. I'm not gonna go, guys. Like be like, oh, she's gonna first go to Solo. No, I'm gonna
No, I
go
think
with some of the
that has
earlier
to be
works.
a build up, I feel like. You got to watch
Hmm.
everything first and then maybe Solo.
Yeah,
Yeah,
then
maybe. Yeah.
maybe Solo. But yeah, so
You're up
I'm
for
I'm
it.
so excited that we were able to do this.
Yeah,
And finally our collaboration of
Yeah.
2023 happened.
that's right. Well, keep it going. And yeah, this has been a really enjoyable conversation. It's funny that you should mention Fassbender because I just this morning published the newest episode of my podcast on a TV series he did in 1972, 73 called 8 Hours Don't Make a Day. And it's like an 8 hour long movie that's in like five installments. So I don't know if either of you have seen it or not, or if you've
Mm-mm.
heard much about it. You don't think of Fassbender as like an uplifting family story, but
No.
that's exactly what this is, and it's
Wow.
brilliant. It is awesome. I really recommend that they're all in the Criterion channel if you subscribe to that, or get the DVD or Blu-ray. It's available, but you will find yourself just falling in love with these characters. It's like a German working class family in the city of Cologne. About a young man who works in a tool and die factory and meets up with a woman, and they become kind of young lovers, and then they end up getting married, and he's going through some labor issues at work with management. It's a very mundane, down to earth story, but the characters are just delightful. And just did an episode with me and three other guests talking about it, and we all just love this film quite a bit. And it is unlike anything I've ever seen from Fassbender, and I love his movies too. But this is like a whole different side of this guy. So it's really a high recommendation. And like I say, I just published it on
And you said
CriterionCast.com.
it was 8 hours don't make a day, right?
That's the name of the film. Is 8 hours don't make a day. It's like, I guess it's like about a working shift. Like there's 8 hours of work, but then there's the rest of your life. I guess that's what the title is alluding
And
to,
this is
something
a
like that.
newer Criterion release as well, right?
The disc came out in 2018. It's like I say, this is a 5 part 8 hour TV miniseries that ran on German TV. It was moderately successful, and Fassbender at the time was kind of an up and coming director, and so this uh, this network that kind of had more like left leaning politics, and they wanted to do a family story that was also about worker solidarity and standing up for your rights on the job and all of that. So they hired Fassbender, and he wrote the screenplay, filmed it between April and August of 1972, and it ran from the winter of 72, or the late fall 72 into the winter of 73. But then, like a lot of TV stuff, it just kind of disappears. So it was kind of like went into obscurity. Like people who knew Fassbender knew those films existed, but they were never available for watching. So in like
Mm.
2017, it's like, oh, here's 8 hours of brand new Fassbender that nobody's ever seen before. And it's got all of his famous actors on the familiar faces. If you watch this stuff, like Hana Shigula is in it. She's the blonde woman who's in a lot of his best films. And it's just like this revelation, because not only, like I say, it's like 8 hours of fresh material, but it's a really uplifting and delightful story. There's this grandma who's like the kind of the heart and soul of the family, and she's a riot. She's so wise, and she's always seeing a problem and fixing it, and getting people to work through their conflicts. So it's a very like happy ending type of thing, which again, you don't think about that with Fassbender, but
No, not at
he,
all.
he he took a different approach, and I think it was a real masterstroke. So yeah, that's my newest episode of my podcast.
That sounds very
Anything else
nice.
coming up with you and stuff like that? Any events,
Um,
any other new podcast episodes coming out
well,
besides this one? Do you have
yeah,
the next one in
I'm
line?
I okay. So the next Criterion Reflections will be Sisters, a Brian De Palma film, kind of a
Ooh,
weird
okay.
horror film early in his
Oh.
career. It's about a pair of Siamese twin sisters who grow to adulthood, and then they're separated. And I haven't even not even watched it yet, but it's supposedly like really bizarre, kind of Hitchcocky, scary type of stuff. In fact, in the original marketing, it's pretty funny. The radio ads for the movie say there will be a period of shock recovery after the film, so that they're gonna they're gonna give you a chance to chill out and get your nerves back together. What a crazy hype! And then have you ever heard of a movie called Koyaanisqatsi?
Yeah, I've
It's
heard of it.
right. So there's a box set called the Kotze trilogy, because they actually made 3 films, and it's kind of like the introduction of like this fast paced editing, and kind of like a God's eye perspective, like that really super sped up of cars zooming down the freeway, or people going through subway turnstiles, or in shopping malls or stuff. But it's about time, and about humanity, and about nature. So it's like this very visual kind of sensory feast with a great Philip Glass score. So I do another podcast called Inside the Box, and my friend Trevor Barrett and I, we will take a Criterion box set and we'll just talk about all the films in that set, whatever it is. Like we did the oh gosh, it's it was the movie that The Departed was based on.
Oh,
Infernal Affairs, the Infernal Affairs
yes.
trilogy, right? So we did that back in like November. So we do one of these every 2 or 3 months or so. So we maybe every 4 months. So those are the podcasts I've got coming up soon. And I'm also been getting involved with this local Grand Rapids Film Society. We were talking about that before the show. And we're going to be doing screenings of Lady Snowblood and Tampopo coming up in May and some other cool stuff. So yeah, I've got a lot of different things going on that are film related, both in my podcasting life and also in my local community. So that's a little
And
bit
of
about
course,
what
if
I'm
you
up
want to
to.
check out any of that type of stuff, I will be linking it below. And I will also
Yes.
link, shameless plug,
Yeah.
our last Tango in Paris
Yes,
podcast that we
absolutely.
ended
That
up
was
doing as well.
I so enjoyed talking with you about that film because I know it's a meaningful one for you, but I thought it really made for a great, compelling episode. And again, getting a young woman's perspective on that film with all the scandals and
Rare and
all this
tough to
stuff.
find, I bet.
Yeah,
It was a
well, but
great episode, guys. I really enjoyed it.
yeah, and then I had a couple other friends that came on and kind of offered their insights as well. So yeah, and I think this one of the Fossbender that I was just talking about, a really fantastic episode. I mean, I'm always biased, but I think it was a great conversation, and I get some interesting people to join me to talk movies, and I think that's one of the things I really love most about the podcast. I'm just so grateful that people want to come in and dig into these movies, like we did tonight. Not just say, "Oh, that was pretty awesome, go check it out," but really let's get into the meat of what this film is telling us and find
Yeah,
the good stuff and bring it to the surface.
Yeah, and once
absolutely.
again, we thank you so much for joining us again and for being patient with
Yeah.
us when we struggled with our schedule and
Oh
everything like
yeah,
that. And thank you to the listeners for being patient with us because
yeah.
You guys
my
already know, yeah.
oncology and hematology class is sucking out every last drip of life from within me. And I took the exam yesterday, so I regenerated for today.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
thank
Well,
you
wish you
guys
all the
so,
best.
so much
Yeah,
for listening. Thank you, David, for being a guest as usual.
yeah.
And
Sensei.
we'll have to plan out the next one. Hopefully, we won't go 2 years
Yeah.
No,
without
we
doing
will
stuff.
not. We will
That's
not
not
go
going to
2
happen
years.
anymore.
Well, and
Um,
it's nice to get my shout out in person at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
So as always, thank you so much for listening to the podcast,
Oh, for
and thank you to our patrons. We got Sensei David, who's here with us now.
Woo!
We have Homeboy James, we
Yeah.
have Danny Boy, and we have our
Woo!
buddy Ryan. Thank you guys so much for subscribing to our Patreon. If you subscribe to our dollar tier, you get a shout out every episode. Hopefully, maybe as time progresses and schedule begins to change, we can actually start offering a little something fresh and funky new available on the Patreon. But until then, it's just going to be a little fun, little cheeky shout outs. But thank you guys so much. Please be sure to check out past episodes that we've done. Please be sure to check out David, and we will see you next time. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye.